Hi, I'm Sumit Bose, and this is the Net Hero podcast. Who's it for? It's for you. If you care about the planet and you care about business, we believe that businesses are responsible for a lot of the damage that has been done to the planet, but they're also responsible for finding the solutions. We need innovation, we need ideas, we need people who are trying to make a difference, and that's what this podcast is about. If you know someone who is trying to make a change, then get them to come along on the podcast. Listen in every week, subscribe, and make sure that you follow us on social media. Our two news platforms, Energy Live News and Future Net Zero, cover everything we do. And this episode is recorded live, so enjoy.
Bugs. Now, if you have any phobia of insects, turn this up more. It'll help you. It'll give you some sort of therapy. If you like Spider-Man, you're going to love this. So I'm going to discuss today something that I've been wanting to talk about on the podcast for a long time, which is how we take the world with us. Now, it's all very well lecturing people about, being green, and most people do that in the West. But there are parts of the world where people are struggling just to eat, to get water. How do we get farmers in parts of the world that are developing to make sure that they are part of our net zero journey? One of the areas that people have discussed for a while is insects. Farming insects, creating an economy around them, eating them, of course. They're eaten in some parts of the world. And, you've probably seen the odd restaurant here in the UK and certainly in other parts of the world, which kind of do these as a novelty treat. But there's a bigger story around that. There's a bigger story around kind of how we take societies with us and whether, the whole idea of a food culture based that on insects, which have a much smaller footprint in terms of their carbon compared to livestock, could be the way to go. Well, that's what I'm going to talk today from a lovely but frozen Washington, D.C. Joins me, Kate Schecter, CEO of World Neighbours. Have you got a blanket, Kate? That's the main thing.
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
Good.
And
Stay
thanks for
warm.
having me.
So before we get into what is World Neighbours, you told me before we started recording, it's been going 75 years. I have to admit ignorance. I've not heard of it. So can you explain to our viewers and listeners what World Neighbours is?
Well, yes, I'm not surprised you haven't heard of it. We tend to be very well known in the countries where we work, but not very well known in the United States or in Europe. But I think we're always working to get better known because our model has been around for 75 years. We're a rural international development organization. We work in rural communities, very isolated many times. We're working in places where no assistance group has ever gone, let alone the government of these countries. We work in Africa, Asia, Latin America, 14 countries. And we have a very kind of unique model that was started by our founder. He was really kind of ahead of his time. In 1951, he came up with this idea of creating a methodology that doesn't give anything away. So, a hand up, not a hand out, but really thinking about how you do that and how you get people to really be self-sufficient. So our focus is on helping rural communities, farmers, and many times women who are isolated in these rural communities, and figuring out how they can help themselves. Now that sounds great, but how do you do that? Well, the first thing we do when we go into a community is look to see what are their current assets. What do they already have in place that they could be building on? Instead of the sort of traditional attitude of, oh, what are your needs? Let's do a needs-based assessment. We do an asset-based assessment, which immediately makes people feel more confident because they realize, yes, there are things we've been doing and we could build on them. And the other part of it is we ask them, what are your highest priorities? What do you want to get training in? We only hire local people. Because we understand that, language is a huge barrier to moving forward. And the other thing is that we understand that change happens slowly. Our methodology is not a quick fix. We take 8 to 10 years working with these communities, till they say to us, we're ready to graduate, we're ready to be on our own. One of the
So
things that I
yeah,
find the most, just one more point I want to
yeah,
make
go
because
on,
I
go on.
think it's key to all of this is, and one of the things that I've found so appealing about this methodology is we recognize that people need to save money, that giving them money is not going to solve the problem.
Hmm.
And so instead of using the microfinance methodology, we use something called savings and credits. There are no banks out there in these incredibly remote areas. And so people save money together and they use that money to invest in each other at very low interest rates. I'll admit to you, I was kind of skeptical of this method. I thought, yeah, it sounds fine, but really kind of, on a very grassroots level, I have been shocked at how much money these people save and
Wow.
invest in each other.
You're not, are you a charity or are you an NGO? Do you get federal funding or how do you get out there to these places in the first place?
We have been around for 75 years. For 65 of those years, World Neighbors Board didn't let the staff apply to the U.S. government. We are based in Oklahoma. We have been supported by wealthy families, primarily
Mm.
in
Right.
the Oklahoma, Texas area, but now we've also moved, to many other states. We're very highly supported by people in Silicon Valley who really like a lot of the innovations that are happening out there. But for 10 years, we did get USAID funding and we did lose that funding. So that was quite devastating. But because I was very wary of that government funding, we only used it in one area of the world. And so we were able to kind of readjust with
Gotcha.
this devastation. Yeah.
Let's talk about insects, which is, I think, it's one of those things that it's a very interesting one, isn't it? Because if you look societal, we've been eating these things for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years in parts of the world. And all of a sudden, it's become a big thing because people are talking about, you know, the carbon footprint. To grow, I don't know, 10,000 grasshoppers takes bugger all space compared to growing one cow. So, in terms of where you see, before we talk about what you're doing, um, is there, I'm going to use a pun here, but is there an appetite for more insect farming globally?
Absolutely. I think one of the wonderful aspects of this methodology that I've kind of outlined for you is that it allows for innovation on the ground. We're not going in there and telling them, this is how you should do things so that you
Mm,
will live better. We're asking them to figure out how to improve their lot. And what happens is you get these incredible innovations, very simple. Very simple. Sometimes there's no technology involved. And I think the insect example where these grasshoppers were a real menace. They were really damaging the crops.
yeah.
They were a real problem for them, and they had to solve this problem. How were they going to do something that was going to allow them to benefit from this problem, and also, allow the crops to keep growing? So, brilliant idea. Let's go in at night, gather as many grasshoppers as we can. It's not unheard of in Asian culture to eat grasshoppers. So you're not starting from the base here.
Yeah.
Um, and then using that to create a very, a spicy sauce that is very, very attractive. The other thing I want to point out about this wonderful example of sort of conquering a pest and making it useful for yourself is that the farmers came up with the idea of a local market. The market didn't exist before. They're the ones who came up with this idea of not only creating this grasshopper sauce, but also having a local market where they could sell it on a regular basis. Now, at the beginning, the market didn't bring in that many customers, but as word got around, it really sped fast. We're seeing that market mechanism take off around the world. For years and years, farmers sold their goods to a middleman, and then the
Mhm.
middlemen took a big cut and took it off to the market, and that was it. You didn't really know what they were getting for. So now more and more we're seeing the farmers saying, no, 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 we want to have the markets right in front of our farms. we will figure out ways to either rent the land that we need to or to borrow the land in order to have, a market 2 times a week. Women who've really lost out in all of this because they're doing a lot of the labor and not getting
Yeah,
any of the benefits in
yeah.
the marketplace are now starting their own markets on the side of the road. I just was in India and I saw the most amazing, sort of pop-up markets with not just food, but also creative ideas. They had gotten a machine to make incense and were selling incense as part of the marketplace.
So this place, let's talk about the bugs in particular. That study where they've made this sauce, which country was that in?
That's Indonesia. Indonesia.
And so the farmers there had the pest problem.
Yes.
You guys helped them to go, right, come on, what can, how did anyone come up with the idea of making a kind of, I don't know, a Tabasco out of crickets? And it sounds brilliant.
Well, what I've learned the hard way is that Indonesian cuisine is very, very spicy. They
Yeah, yeah,
like
it is. Yeah.
very hot sauces. Yeah. So, and you say, how did we come? No, no, no. They came up with this. This was something that they
So
were
they what
making.
they knew that you could make a sauce out of these things, or they just boil them up and suddenly you get sauce that's spicy? How does it work?
In all of these countries, there are many traditional practices that have been lost.
Mm. Right.
And what we are seeing more and more is a return to ancient ancient practices that now are kind of being modernized. So people have been eating grasshoppers in Asia and in Indonesia for hundreds of years probably, and understanding that there's protein involved
Yeah.
here. So this was somebody probably experimenting with a traditional recipe to come up with this.
You've got this market that you said, and I think it started off with, like you said, just a few people, and it's grown massively now. I think you've got kind of like, around about 80 stores now, thousands of people coming
80,
and
80
stuff.
stalls at the
Yeah, yeah.
latest. Yeah, right,
So
right.
this is becoming the actual economic area. That's what I'm trying to get to is this synergy between the climate and economy. You got the pest, you got all of that, and then you're trying to remove the pest, but it's created a market, an actual, fiscal market.
That's right. What I'm seeing all over the world is that in farmers, especially these very, remote areas, they're fighting. They could be fighting nature or they could be
Yeah,
working with nature.
yeah,
A good example is in Nepal. The bamboo was growing so fast and taking over so much of the arable land that the farmers couldn't keep up with it. So instead of fighting it, they turned it into a commodity and made it a very, very successful way to sell wood. And showed people that bamboo doesn't have to be only a pest. It's actually one of the strongest woods you can use. So, in many of these places, they're very traditional societies where
yeah.
people do what their parents did, and you don't get out of your lane. So one of the things I think that's happening out there is that younger people are starting to say, well, let's experiment. Let's see if we try it this way, what will happen? A lot of times innovations happen because somebody is a little bit radical and wants to try something different. The grasshopper markets are a perfect example of that.
What about the wider issue of kind of climate adaptation, right? Because you could say, okay, a few grasshoppers, you make a bit of a market, that's cool. But is any of this doing any good to sort of help with the kind of whole net zero journey? I said right at the beginning, we always have this thing where it seems to be very much a smug Western thing in developed societies. But these people, definitely in the places you're talking about, they're at the forefront of climate change. They get the monsoons, the cyclones, they get the floods, they get the droughts in Africa, all of that. So is any of this stuff helping, particularly kind of the insect farming side of things, is that helping with any kind of climate mitigation?
Absolutely. Not only are they making more money because now they have this cool hot sauce, but they are getting rid of the pests so that they are able to grow the crops that they were trying to grow and having so much trouble with them. That also is something that we've encouraged. This whole idea of instead of using store-bought pesticides and fertilizers, we all around the world are encouraging organic pesticides and fertilizers, teaching people how to make them with the waste from their animals and their compost. And then now we've gotten to a point in many parts of the world where they're selling their organic fertilizers and fertilizers and pesticides. During COVID, people asked me,
Mm.
"Oh gosh, Kate, your communities must really be suffering if they can't get fertilizers and
Yeah, yeah,
pest."
yeah,
I'm like, "Well, no, not really. We're doing just fine out there because years before COVID hit, this was already on a roll, and especially women were learning how to make these very, very lucrative uh, mixes, these recipes
yeah.
for selling the waste. No, I think that that this grasshopper example is so beautiful because it incorporates so many different issues. You protect the crops. You create a really attractive market that is a niche market. Nobody else has done it yet. So it's actually quite lucrative. You're creating a market where you're selling directly to the consumer, so you don't have a middleman.
Yeah.
And the environment is thriving because of it.
What's the longer term goal with sort of things like this? Because if you look at it, and I don't expect you to have some sort of magic kind of thesis on it, but people have tried to get us in the West to start eating insects. Do the people in these countries see this? Because they eat chickens, they eat other animals that we eat all around the world. Do you see anything changing where people are going, actually, there's a good source of protein? We can do something that's good for the environment to get away from damaging the crops. Is there any growth in actually the kind of eating insects as a food source?
I wouldn't go that far yet. I
Yeah, I
think
thought
it's
so.
pretty isolated to Asian countries. I mean, each one of these regions of the world has sort of unique foods that might turn us off, but
Yeah, yeah,
are considered delicacies in their environments. I mean, a good example is we encourage guinea pig farming
yeah,
in Peru. That it's considered a delicacy there as
yeah, yeah,
well. They
yeah,
sell it to high-end restaurants. They make a lot of money. It doesn't, guinea pigs don't damage the environment. It's really um, a very, very cost-effective kind of farming. And okay, I'll admit it. I was working, in Peru for weeks. The guys kept saying, "You got to try it. You got to try it, Kate." Finally tried it, and I hate to admit it, but it was delicious.
There you
It's
go.
like really juicy chicken. I mean, it might have helped also that it was, outdoor barbecue. But oh gosh, I mean, don't even think about what that looked like.
Kentucky Fried Guinea Pig. I like it. But I mean, in all seriousness, this is the thing that's very interesting is that, you know, you look at the whole farming livestock area and the carbon footprint of that globally is enormous. Your country, you've got so much land being used for growing cattle, and then you've got GMO crops and all that. We've got the issues around the world where we're depleting the soils. Does there need to be, with what you're doing there, you show these different things. Do you think there needs to be some idea of, the lessons that you're learning from these different cultures is adaptation and maybe changing the way we eat things?
Absolutely. I think that it's happening already. There's more and more of an understanding that organic farming is really the only kind of farming we should be doing. Even agribusiness has been influenced by it. Again, during COVID when they couldn't get the chemical fertilizers, people started to use more and more of what was accessible, which is organic farming. And yes, I think that there is more and more of an understanding of it now. Whether people are going to eat less meat or not is, of course, very
Yeah,
questionable.
yeah.
But there's more and more of a respect, I think, for um, traditional farming. But, like I was saying before, kind of looking back at for example, in Latin America, there's a lot of return to Incan, Mayan, Mesoamerican techniques for water conservation
Right.
and learning how to do agriculture that's aquaponics, that just uses a lot less water because you're growing directly in water. And so you see these kinds of interesting techniques emerging all over the world, and people are actually doing better. I mean,
Yeah,
despite
yeah.
all of the other things that are going on in the world, in these rural communities, they are able to develop better food security by using these techniques.
When your teams go out there, and I don't want to sound condescending, but what's the awareness of climate change, or do they see it as something different? Because we've got it here as a political thing, right? We've got net zero. In your country, you've got Trump saying, let's go back to oil and gas. You've got people going, build wind turbines, let's build solar, etc. For these people, who I said at the beginning, at the cutting edge of all this change, how do they see climate change? Do they see it as a political issue, or is it something slightly different for them?
Well, as you said earlier, they're sort of the front line of climate change. They're the ones who get hit the hardest. They're fully aware of it. They are much more sophisticated in terms of learning about weather prediction, rainfall
Mm,
prediction, working with local universities and local governments to prepare for changing uh, rainfall patterns. So they're much more sophisticated than we might think.
I
Um,
thought so.
I'm not sure they're aware of the politics around it, and hopefully those politics don't affect them that much because they're so far from some of the issues that we're hearing about every day here. Um, they do realize that they're not getting access to some of the resources that we get, that we have access to. Many of these communities are not on the grid.
Yeah,
They're leapfrogging straight into solar energy, not of their own choice, but because it's
yeah,
just a reality for them.
yeah.
So, yeah, no, I think you would be surprised by the level of sophistication and knowledge about the impact of. Another example is that in India, for example, the heat has gotten to be so severe
Of
that
course.
we are actually stepping in and saying we've got to protect people from when they're out in the fields, because they're dying from it. So there's no doubt that they're highly aware of and working with us and with others to figure out how to protect themselves.
People talk about sustainable farming, and before we end, I want to talk about this. You're there, right? Where these people, like you said, they are really what we were, and they've kept these cultures going, which is thank God for them, because otherwise we'd all be in a mess. But they're a very small percentage of what we do globally in terms of farming. Global farming is industrial farming at present still. So, what do you think we can learn from these people? Like you said, they're more sophisticated than we think. They're fully aware of what's going on. And we sort of lecture, we have these things like COP and all of that, and it's all kind of lectured from that point of view. What do you think politicians, us, just as public, could learn from the people that your guys work with?
One of the things that people need to constantly, keep at the forefront is that when we are using industrial farming, we're destroying the earth. Yes, you might get a great crop this week, or this year, but next year you can't use that land anymore. So regenerating nutrients into the soil, making sure that we're not destroying as we grow are really, they're not just important, they're key to our survival. And that's what organic agriculture, agroforestry, all of these sort of techniques that are being used are all about. When you chop down trees, you better be planting some other ones so that that you're going to have some next time. Haiti, for example, we continue to work in Haiti despite the
Yeah.
circumstances there, and it's been denuded. I mean, there's just huge expanses where trees have been chopped down. We, of course, have really encouraged agroforestry there and making sure that you don't just take, you also give back to the soil. And one of the things we do that's really fantastic, we do it around the world, but it's saved people in Haiti, is fish ponds, creating man-made, I should say, human-made fish ponds up in the mountains. Now, it's so ironic. Haiti is an island nation.
Yeah.
You think that they should be just fishing off the coast, right? But by creating these freshwater ponds up in the mountains, collecting water so that you have it for irrigation later,
Huh.
and also a source of protein when you can't go down to the markets because it's too dangerous to the coast, has allowed farmers to really thrive up there. Um, Now they're quite isolated,
Yeah.
but they're able to sell the fish to their neighboring communities. Now, you asked me, how is this going to work? I mean,
Yeah.
there's these small little farms,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
well, the whole idea behind World Neighbors is that we get the ball rolling. We're a catalyst and we're liaisons for them, for these farmers, then reaching out to their local and municipal and national governments to demonstrate to them the work that they're doing and to get the government to support them and to put them on the grid and to make sure their children have access to education and to make sure that they have access to health care. All of those things that the government should be doing, we are helping the government to be aware of all this amazing stuff that's happening in their own countries. Healthcare is a perfect example. For decades now, we have been showing for example, the Kenyan government work that's going on in rural areas, but where people are infected with HIV/AIDS,
Hmm.
getting those people to clinics where the government has the ARV drugs, but the two have never connected, has led to people becoming thriving farmers again. People who are on their deathbeds will become. Now, I am worried about what's going to happen now with the destruction of USAID and especially what the future of PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which allowed these countries to buy all of
Mm.
these drugs, what will happen next. But we had huge success with simply putting, governments and these remote communities together, and then scaling up because the governments can invest and scale up. In Indonesia, the government has loved some of what they've seen, and they've invested in some of the innovations that they've seen.
Have they bought some hot pepper sauce,
I'm
the
sure they
grasshopper
do.
sauce for their dining of dignitaries?
I'm sure they're all clamoring for that
They
unique.
are. They are. I feel like I need to get a bottle. I like
I
spicy
know.
sauce. You'll have to send me one. Listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. What's your hope for what you guys are doing? And also, really, just to end with, we look at this thing and it seems sometimes an insurmountable problem. People look at big things. Let's build nuclear. Let's build this. Let's stop using plastic. You know, is there an element of actually what you're seeing here in the things, the pockets where these amazing people, these little kind of communities are just doing it themselves, that there is kind of some hope for us to try and push the needle? And it doesn't have to be that big ticket stuff. It can be quite very simple and, fairly cheap level to make a change.
Absolutely. I mean, every time I go out to the field and see what's happening, I'm really encouraged. Our founder really was incredibly
Who was your founder,
vision.
by the way?
His name was Dr. John Peters.
Okay.
He survived World War II. He was a chaplain during the war, and he said to himself, he was stationed in the Philippines, And he said to himself, if I get out of this alive, I
I'm
really
going to
want
do
to do
something.
something. Yeah.
Wow.
And so he was kind of thinking about what would work. And one of the things that he said, and I remind myself of this all the time, because in America, we want to do everything bigger and bigger and better and
Mm,
better. He said, start small and build from there. And that key of understanding that everybody has capacity to help themselves if they're given an opportunity, and that you got to start small and build from there. And that things take time. I think we also are extremely impatient in our part of the world. We
yeah.
want insta fixes.
Yeah.
Um, but I've been with World Neighbors now for almost 12 years, and I can tell you huge changes are happening in that.
Brilliant.
But it took a decade, it took
Take your time, have your hot sauce, and things will get better. I
exactly.
like it. Listen, I really appreciate you getting up early to talk to me. Thank you so much. Wrap up warm. Have a nice insect burger. Keep you going with a dash of hot sauce. That'll keep you there. Listen, great stuff. Your website, I assume, is it called worldneighbours.com?
WN.org.
Right, brilliant. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me, Kate. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks very much. Now, ladies and gents, you've heard what Kate said. If you're involved in the world of trying to save things, get yourself some hot sauce from Indonesia made out of crickets. But in all seriousness, tell us what you think about what we've discussed today, sustainable farming and the way that the climate could be helped by these people who are really at the cutting edge of it all. My thanks to Rob for the production this week, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Net Hero Podcast.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from FutureNetZero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. FutureNetZero.com. Better business, better planet.